Hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast, Unpacking Organizations. Today, we bring around another episode where we talk about our passion topics. I'm Shradha, and I have my co host with me, Rupert. Hi, Rupert. How are you
Hi,
doing
Shradha.
today?
Good morning. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing really well.
Unpacking Organizations, the Practitioners Podcast. Sponsored by Orgvue.
So, for today's episode, Rupert, I was thinking that, we've discussed a lot of things in this season, but I think you would agree that the most common issue that you face when you're doing org design with either your clients or with the organizations that you're working with is that one of the biggest trap is that you're designing around people, or people are asking, leaders are asking you to design around people. Is that right? Is that what is the biggest issue that you face?
It's a big issue, and we talked about it in one of our previous podcasts, the trap of designing around people. But actually, I would say it's not. It's almost a symptom of the biggest trap.
Oh,
And the
really?
biggest
So
trap,
what is that?
for me, the biggest trap that I've observed over and over again is there is no clarity on the strategy. And we say that org design starts with strategy, and I would go in, I can't tell you how many times, and I obviously can't mention any names, but so often you go in, you say, right, we're going to do the org design. What's the strategy? And you get told, pick an industry. We're going to be number one.
Everybody wants to be number one.
And then there's a few goals, objectives, and that's not a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wish. It's a dream. It's a hope. And I think Richard Rummold in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. When I read his book, it blew me away because he just talked about how most organizations, that's what they do.
Right.
They just have a bunch of goals,
Mm-hmm.
and then they believe they have a strategy, which they don't. And so as an org design practitioner, you're stuck. You're really in trouble because you can't start somewhere. So we say once you have that, then you can come up with your criteria.
Right.
And the reason why we spend so much time struggling with design criteria, and
Because
people do
there's
all
no
these silly
strategy.
Harvey balls where they say hi for three different things that are contradictory, is because the strategy is not clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up trying to unpick what the strategy is in order to get clarity. And it's just, and you can't do that until you've got the strategy clear. And so, and then too many people don't understand how to design a strategy as well. So, it's incumbent on the org design practitioner to really push the team responsible for the strategy to articulate that and articulate the case for change and what you're trying to achieve. And, we did the explainer on capability. What are the capabilities that are going to be differentiating so that we can win in the market that we're trying to win in? And if you're not clear about how you're going to win, and and where, and there's another great book called Playing to Win, which is written by a professor of strategy and the former CEO of P&G. And I'm simplifying, but good strategy is where to play and how to win. So if you don't understand that, then and I think strategy is slightly more than that, but that's a great place to start. And it's like, okay, so if you don't know, if that's not clear, and then the capabilities we need to do that, and that's not articulated in, for instance, what Michael Porter has, which is his activity system, his activity system, then you're really stuck. And so you can't go anywhere. And that's why I think it becomes so political, because then what happens is different power brokers have their own priorities and their own things that they're trying to achieve. And so that's why you end up designing around people and the whole thing becomes fractured and you kind of fall down. And it's also uncomfortable for people to agreed the strategy because it's political. Well, you know, is this the priority? Was this the priority? Is this how we're going to do it?
Or
And
everything is a priority,
and
right? We
it's the
want to
language as
innovate,
well.
we
Like,
want to
yeah,
grow, we want to cut cost, everything we want to do together.
yeah. If
Right,
everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
right, right.
Um, so the
Sorry, you
word
were saying
focus is,
something about the language.
well, language is so important because, you know, people say strategy and it's a euphemism for
Hmm.
so many things, for what's important, or it's a senior conversation, and actually it should really be more about um, actually being true to that word, just like with org design is being true to what is the organization designed for? What are we trying to achieve?
Right,
So if you have that, then probably 50% of the job is a lot easier. And that's true not just for corporate strategy, but also functional strategy. That's, you know, because not all org design is corporate wide.
right.
You know, it could be supply
Yes,
chain. So what does that look like? Or finance function? Or, you know, what are the core capabilities we need to underpin? What is the business strategy? And therefore, what is the strategy for this function or for this geography or for this business unit as that aligns up to those? And that all has to be articulated, and there's a cascade.
agreed.
Um,
And that makes, like, because we don't have the underlying strategy or very identified simple strategy articulated for corporate or business units, then the enabling functions have a double whammy because they are actually doing it in service of those businesses, right? The enabling functions or the HR and the finance and the supply chain are not there for themselves. They're there to just make the businesses more useful or more robust. And if we don't have a business strategy, right, it's very difficult to articulate their strategy as well, right? What kind of people should we be thinking about? What kind of accounting practices should we have? And that makes it a double whammy for the larger part of the organization as well. That's so true. I think what I've seen also, one of the symptoms is that because the strategy is so fluid and so high level, and there's no connection between, and there's no either articulated organizational capability and it's not able to cascade down, then the org design pretty much happens on its own silo and there's no connection why we're doing. So to your point, the design criteria, yes, we write design criterias, but it has no connection back into the strategy and why that design criteria is important because we want to achieve something. So it's like happening in its own silo because, you know, it's a large organization, we can afford to have it, and nothing talks to each other. So the whole system thinking breaks down because
yeah,
of that.
yeah.
So, what are some of the things that you do, Rupert, in order to bring the connection back into strategy, org capability, and org design?
So yeah, it's a really simple thing, but it's articulate the strategy. And it's not the org design practitioner's job to articulate the strategy. It's really the CEO's job, you know, and with support of others, but it really goes to the CEO. And then if that it's helping the CEO understand to the level that has to be articulated so that you can do the design and teasing it out because it's going to be there somewhere. And if it's not written down, it's going to be in people's heads to a large extent. But get that clarity first. And you know, a strategy can be a dynamic thing as well. Like the world keeps on moving, so the idea that a strategy this is another, I think, flaw in management thinking. Really, that the strategy is just set and that's it, and it's a long term thing. And it's the world. I don't think it's ever being like that. I think it evolves as well because the world evolves, opportunities arise, and threats, you know, turn into realities, and and so, you know, new technologies and how so things are constantly changing. So to me, org design is a fluid process. Well, when I say fluid, continuous or semi-continuous. It's not a daily thing. It's not changing on a daily basis, clearly, but it's not sort of rigid and stuck. And I think it's the same with strategy. So org design is very connected to the strategy design. Richard Rummel talks about you design a strategy, which I think is really fascinating. So you design a strategy and you design an organization. And so these things are very connected.
Very
And
cool. And I agree
yeah,
with that the world is changing in the way faster pace. It was always changing, but now the macroeconomics is changing a lot more faster pace, and there are too many complexities that are coming into the organizations because everything is way more connected as well. So I agree with that we cannot be like putting a lot of our love to one strategy. If we can allow to change it, we cannot be
yeah.
so rigid about it.
Actually, we're probably going a little bit off piece, but I'm just going to call out to Richard Rummel again.
Okay.
He did a comparison just to contradict that statement that you made.
Okay.
He did a comparison of the change from 1870 to 1920 versus the change from 1970 to 2020. And the change was more rapid and more profound on every dimension from 1870 to 1920.
Wow, that's
And
fascinating.
so think about the advent of electricity, and within 10 years, everything changed. Famously, the brown houses in Manhattan are so high because of the stench of all the poo droppings from horses
Yes,
and what have you. People
right.
couldn't move. They were stuck where they were. People were all agriculture, and the whole moving into urbanization. So much changed. And I think if you look at any period of history, there's so much change when you look at it from that. And I think since I've been in, let's say, 25 years ish, slightly longer, but I don't want to talk about my age too much. But, I was a management consultant. I did my first management consulting project in 1997. And back
Wow.
then, all we talked about is how the world's changing and how it's changing so rapidly and how all transformations fail. And
It's
now
like
this
deja
is the
vu
greatest
right
change.
now.
And you
Yeah,
know what? It's just continuous. I don't buy into the arc of the story that the pace of change is greater now than other points in time. I just buy into the
very
story that
interesting.
the world is always changing and there's always phenomenal strategic opportunities and threats. And your strategy has to be adapt, and your organization has to be adapt and
That's
adept
a
at
great,
adapting.
great
Yeah.
point. That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Rupert, because, yeah, it's important for us to say that the narrative on some of things have not changed at all, while our perception of it has changed, but it still remains the same.
It's because we all live
Um,
in these
yeah.
bubbles and these information bubbles, and all you get told is it's changing faster now. But has anyone actually sat down and actually measured that?
Interesting.
So you just get told it, and if you hear something like enough times, you just believe it to
You
be true.
believe it. Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
um, so
So maybe we can say that enough times that we need to have a better strategy, and that will start to have be
that
true.
I think that is a truth. We need you need a good strategy that's differentiating to your
Absolutely.
competition, and if you have a good enough strategy, then but you need to be able to execute on that. And a great strategy without execution is a dream as well. So your org design is a core
Right.
component to your ability to execute that strategy.
Fantastic. What is your takeaway, Rupert?
My takeaway is you have to do both. You need a good strategy. You need a good org design. All these things have to be true. And a lot of what we're doing on this podcast is clarifying language, and
Right.
hopefully this also clarifies that strategy is not a goal. If there's one takeaway for people, having a
Yes,
dream of being number one in your industry is just a dream unless you say how you're going to do it. And the org design is key to that
absolutely.
as well, by the way. That's my takeaway. And you?
Rupert, this was educational for me as well because I have not dealt into so much of strategy. I'm an org design practitioner, so I use strategy. So from that perspective, my takeaway will be always push back and ask for more clarity. Like as practitioners, we just sometimes start from a wobbly place because there's no strategy, and then it continues to make our lives miserable. And therefore, I would just ask anybody who's listening that go back and push back and say that let's articulate the strategy a little bit more succinctly and a little bit more clearly so that we all can do our jobs better. So I would say that.
Amazing. Shradha, it's been a pleasure
Awesome.
as always. And until next time, see you.
Likewise, Rupert. Take care. Be well.
Take care.
Bye.
Unpacking Organizations, the Practitioners Podcast. Sponsored by Orgvue.